The morning sun painted the small countryside with a gentle gold, and the wind carried the scent of wet earth after a night of rain. Huyen stood quietly by the doorway, her heart pounding with an emotion she couldn't name. From afar, the sound of an old motorbike echoed down the dirt road, that sound she had waited for days, weeks, perhaps months. It was him. Day had returned. When he appeared at the gate, his clothes still dusty from the long journey, Huyen's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to run to him, but her legs felt frozen. Maya, seeing Dee, screamed with joy, "Uncle Dee!" and ran straight into his arms. Dee lifted the little girl up high, his laughter echoing across the yard, warm and real like sunlight after a storm. For a long moment, Huyen just watched them, her hands trembling slightly. The man she had missed so deeply was finally home. Dizay's met hers quiet, gentle, full of everything unspoken. He stepped closer, placed Maya down, and whispered, "I'm home, Huyen." Her lips quivered. "You came back," she said softly, her voice breaking. Dee nodded, brushing the dust off his sleeves. "I promised, didn't I? I'd come back no matter how far, no matter how hard." The wind rustled through the bamboo trees behind their house. For a while, none of them spoke. They just stood there, feeling the presence of each other, as if afraid that a single blink might make this moment disappear. Inside, the small wooden house still smelled faintly of smoke and guava leaves. Huyen had prepared a simple meal: rice, boiled vegetables, and fish soup. Nothing fancy, yet when Day sat down at the old table, he smiled as if it were a feast. "Maya, give your uncle more soup," Huyen said softly. Day laughed. "I'll serve myself. You sit and rest, Huyen. You look tired." Huyen smiled, hiding her trembling hands. In truth, she hadn't been feeling well for days, dizzy, weak, and strange inside. But at that moment, seeing Day there, she forgot it all. Her heart was light again, and for the first time in a long time, the house was filled with warmth, laughter, and peace. That night, as rain began to fall gently outside, Huyen sat beside Maya's bed, listening to the child's steady breathing. In the next room, Day was repairing his old motorbike, the same one that had brought him all the way back to them. Huyen's eyes softened. "He's home," she whispered to herself. Finally, he's home. Yet, somewhere deep inside her, an unfamiliar flutter, both gentle and frightening, stirred in her heart and body, hinting at a secret she had yet to discover. The next morning arrived with the sound of roosters crowing and sunlight streaming gently through the old bamboo blinds. Huyen woke up earlier than usual. The air was cool, filled with the scent of morning dew. She quietly stepped outside, her feet brushing against the damp earth. Day was already in the yard, fixing his motorbike. Maya sat nearby, drawing little shapes in the dust with a stick. When Day looked up, his smile was warm and familiar. "Good morning," he said. Huyen smiled faintly, but there was something distant in her eyes. "You woke up early again," she said softly. Day laughed. "I'm used to it. The bike still needs some work before it can take long trips again." She nodded and went to prepare breakfast. But as she bent down to wash the rice, a sudden wave of dizziness struck her. The world around her blurred for a moment. She gripped the wooden table, breathing slowly until the spinning stopped. "Mama, are you okay?" Maya asked, her small voice filled with worry. "I'm fine, Maya," Huyen said gently, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." Throughout the morning, she tried to ignore the strange weakness that followed her, but it didn't go away. Her body felt heavier than usual, her appetite changed, and her emotions seemed to shift without reason. Later that day, while Day and Maya were repairing the small fence outside, Huyen went to visit the local midwife, an old woman who had known her since she moved to the village. The midwife welcomed her with a knowing smile. You don't look well, Huyen. Sit down, my dear. After a few quiet questions, a short pause filled the room. The old woman placed her hand gently on Huyen's arm and whispered, "Child, you're going to be a mother again." Huyen froze. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The old woman smiled softly. "You're about a month along, I'd say. Congratulations." Tears welled up in Huyen's eyes, not of sadness, but of shock and wonder. "A baby?" she murmured. On her way home, the path seemed longer than usual. Every sound, the chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, the distant laughter of Maya felt sharper, more real. Her heart was trembling. That night, as the oil lamp flickered beside her, Huyen sat silently, watching to play with Maya. They looked like a family, laughing, teasing, sharing the simplest joy. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were warm. Still, a thought haunted her. Should she tell Dee? He had just come back from a long, hard journey. He looked exhausted but peaceful. Would this news bring him happiness or worry? She placed a hand gently on her stomach, whispering into the soft darkness, "My little one, what should Mama do?" For the next few days, Huyen lived in quiet hesitation. Every morning, she acted as if nothing had changed, preparing breakfast, sweeping the yard, washing clothes by the stream with Maya. Yet deep inside, a storm brewed in her heart. Day often noticed that she seemed more tired than usual. Sometimes, while hanging the laundry, she would stop and press her hand to her chest, her face pale. Other times, she would stare into the distance, lost in thought. One afternoon, while repairing the chicken coop, Dee looked up and said softly, "Huyen, are you feeling unwell these days? You've been quiet." Huyen froze. She didn't expect him to notice so quickly. "No, I'm fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired from the rain these past few nights." Dee wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at her with gentle concern. "You've been through enough storms already, Huyen. Don't carry everything alone anymore." His words touched something deep within her. She wanted to tell him everything about the dizziness, about the visit to the midwife, about the tiny heartbeat she now carried inside. But the words wouldn't come. Something stopped her fear. Fear that this new life might burden Dee, who had already sacrificed so much. Fear that fate might once again take away what little peace they had. That night, after putting Maya to sleep, Dee and Huyen sat outside under the dim glow of the lantern. The sound of crickets filled the silence. Dee smiled faintly. "Do you remember, Huyen? The first night we sat like this, you said the stars looked like rice seeds scattered across the sky." She nodded. "Yes. And you said if we plant our dreams well, one day they'll grow." Dee chuckled softly. "I still believe that." Huyen turned away, hiding the tears that had started to form. She whispered to herself, so quietly that Dee couldn't hear, "Then I must protect this dream too, no matter what." Inside the house, Maya stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about Uncle Dee and noodles. The simple sound made them both smile. But later, when Huyen lay awake, staring at the flickering light, her hand once again found her belly. Her heart whispered a silent promise. "One day I'll tell him, but not now, not yet." The days passed slowly in the small countryside home. The air was filled with the scent of blooming guava flowers, and the gentle hum of bees echoed from the garden. Life seemed peaceful, but Dee could feel something was different. Huyen no longer joined him for early morning walks to the stream. She moved more carefully, often holding her stomach as if afraid of hurting something fragile inside. Sometimes, when he came home from the fields, he found her sitting quietly on the porch, lost in thought, her eyes heavy with worry. One evening, Dee came back, carrying a small basket of sweet potatoes. "Look, Huyen," he said cheerfully. "I roasted these by the fire on the way home. Maya loves them, let's surprise her. But Huyen didn't smile like she used to. She looked down, her fingers trembling as she took one of the roasted roots. Thank you, Dee. You always think of us. Dee knelt beside her, his eyes searching hers. Huyen, what's going on? He asked softly. You've been distant lately. Are you hiding something from me? She froze, her throat tightened, words refusing to come out. No, I'm just tired, she whispered. Tired? He repeated gently. You've been pale, quiet, and you haven't eaten much. That's not just tired, Huyen. Maya ran over with her innocent laughter, holding up a small paper flower she made. Mom, Uncle D, look what I made. The tension melted instantly. Huyen forced a smile, hugging her daughter tightly. It's beautiful, Maya. You're such a good girl. Day looked at them, his heart softening. Whatever secret Huyen was carrying, he knew it must be heavy. He didn't want to pressure her, but he couldn't ignore his worry either. That night, as the moonlight spilled through the bamboo window, Day couldn't sleep. He sat up, staring at the faint glow outlining Huyen's sleeping figure beside Maya. He whispered quietly, Whatever it is, Huyen, I'll stand by you. The next morning, he decided to act without asking more questions. He took the long road into town and returned with a small basket of fresh milk, fruits, and vitamins. When he handed them to Huyen, she looked at him in surprise. What are these for? For your strength, he replied simply. You need to take care of yourself more. Huyen's eyes filled with tears. She turned away, afraid that if she looked at him any longer, her secret would burst out in sobs. But Day didn't need her to speak. Deep inside, he already knew. He didn't know how or when, but his heart told him there was a new life growing quietly between them. And though she hadn't told him yet, his soul had already begun to prepare for it with love, patience, and a silent vow to protect them both. The morning sun filtered gently through the bamboo curtains, painting soft, golden stripes across the floor. Outside, the sound of birds filled the air, mingling with the quiet rustle of leaves. Huyen sat on the porch, her hands folded over her stomach, her heart beating faster than usual. For days, she had carried the secret inside her, a mixture of fear and hope, joy and uncertainty. She didn't know how to tell D.A. What if he wasn't ready? What if it changed everything between them? But the weight of silence had grown too heavy. When Day returned from the fields, his shirt damp with sweat, he smiled warmly as he approached her. You've been sitting there all morning, he said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Are you feeling all right? She nodded weakly. Dee, there's something I need to tell you. He froze, sensing the seriousness in her tone. What is it, Huyen? Her lips trembled. She looked into his eyes, those kind, steady eyes that had carried her through so much pain and darkness. Dee, I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air like a whisper carried by the wind. For a long moment, Day didn't speak. His eyes widened, then softened, and a small, trembling smile began to form on his lips. Huyen, you mean? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes. I just found out recently. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid I didn't know what you'd think. He dropped to his knees in front of her, taking her hands in his rough, calloused palms. Afraid? Huyen, why would you ever be afraid? This is the happiest news I could ever imagine. Her tears fell freely now. But our life is still so hard, Dee. We barely have enough for Maya, and now another child. He placed a hand gently over her lips. Huyen, listen to me. We face storms, hunger, fear, but we've always survived because we have each other. This child is a blessing, not a burden. Huyen's sobs broke into soft laughter. She pressed her forehead against his. You really mean it? He smiled. his voice trembling with emotion. "I've never meant anything more in my life. I'll work harder, Huyen. I'll build a stronger house, plant more crops, whatever it takes. You just take care of yourself and the baby." Maya, who had been playing nearby, looked up in confusion. "Mom, why are you crying? Uncle Duh? What's wrong?" Duh turned to her with a radiant smile. "Nothing's wrong, little one. You're going to be a big sister." Maya gasped in surprise. "Really? There's going to be a baby?" Huyen nodded, laughing through her tears. "Yes, my love. There's going to be a baby." Maya clapped her hands joyfully, running in circles around them. "A baby! A baby!" As the sun shone brighter over their small home, Day held Huyen close, feeling the warmth of her tears against his chest. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel uncertain, it felt full of promise. In that humble yard surrounded by the scent of fresh soil and blooming guava, the three of them stood together, a small family, reborn in love, hope, and the quiet miracle of life.